live. Looks like we might be live here. Unique New York. Ow now, brown cow. Hello, all, and welcome to round 2 of the RV Voice Live Mashup. Thank you for being a part of this event. And today we are going to cover our RVs Junk. And our 3 main points are to focus on are 1, state of RVs right now. 2, are and were COVID campers a real thing? And 3, our company's training to be better, taking feedback and doing something about it. And lastly, after all that, guys, we're going to have a Q&A, time permitting. We do have lives to attend to tonight, but here, listen up, folks, guys. We want to hear and see what you guys have to think. And we know this could probably be a strong topic, and that's why we're talking about it. If you have strong opinions, please keep the language respectful and keep it PG, because we want you to be seen and heard. So after that, please and thank you, keep it PG. While you guys are hopping on, please let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to see it, whether it's from Maine, California, Nebraska, Texas, wherever it may be. Just let us know. We'd love to see where you're coming from. But before we get started, guys, this live event is being brought to you by BishFix. This is Bish's RV's internal service platform. This can help you get your RV service done faster. The average repair time is 90 days in the industry, and we've got it down to less than that while still keeping your RV. Owning RV, you guys will know that service can be a real pain. The pain of months in the shop, monthly payments while doing so, 90 days to get it fixed while you're still making your payments. That's not very fun. So if you would like a discount to lock in your price for years to come for BishFix, type in RV Voice as the promo code. That's less than $17 a month. That's a sub sandwich nowadays in some places, so that really sucks. But anyway, $17 a month, and it will make your RV service life so much better. All right, I know I said a lot here, guys, but since you guys are hopping on here, please, and thank you for being here. But please, by supporting this event, stay tuned for a free gift that we are going to offer you. We're not going to offer it right now because we said too much, but holy moly. Let's get into it. So if you haven't followed Josh or JD, follow the channels now. Show them some love, because these guys are awesome. They know their stuff, and they are industry experts. They've been at it for a very long time. So go show them some love, and let's get into this, guys. Let's bring the fellas on to see what the experts have to say about our RVs Junk. So welcome, Josh and JD, and thank you for being here. I'm excited to hear what you have to come to say about this topic today. All righty, guys, let's get you into it. Do you guys have anything you'd want to share before we get going?
Go ahead, JD.
Josh has nicer hair than I do.
And I'm telling you, I just woke up like this.
Yep. It's good to see you, man. Round 2.
Round 2.
Let's see if we can find something we disagree on in this video.
I'm really curious. Now, for anyone who is watching this, none of this is staged. None of this is like propped up. Like, okay, you say this, we'll say this. This is, we've got a couple of basic talking points. That's all we know. And I really want to, see what happens over here in the comment section. And let's kind of really curious to see how everything goes, like what your opinion is. Now, the one thing I would ask is, I know that some people have some really strong feelings on this, and I think that's awesome, and that's okay. But I would say, if you're here, have a little bit of an open mind. You might find that somebody else has a little bit different perspective, and I'm really interested to know what you think too.
Yeah, same here. I think that the key behind this is that we have an honest and fair debate about a very, very controversial topic that a lot of people get emotional about, and a lot of people blanketly will use the terms we're going to mention in this video on every single video we make. Every time we do an RV tour, every time we talk about an RV, anytime we talk about brands that are doing great, it's junk. Every time we talk about brands that are doing poorly, it's junk. Everything's junk. So I think this is going to be a great video, because I think we really have needed to hash out this conversation with 2 people who absolutely spend way too much time in smoking hot RVs that are 200 degrees in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
It's our weight loss program.
It hasn't worked for me. I don't know if you've checked out my footage lately, but let's get going.
All righty, guys. Well, let's bring in the audience's thoughts right away. So, number one, what are the audience thinking, or what do they think about the state of RV quality right now? So, what's your opinion? The perception of RV quality has been a hot topic among RV owners, like you were saying, JD and Josh, and the enthusiasts and industry insiders. Social media reviews are filled with both praises and complaints. JD, let's start off with you. You have a large engaged audience, and what are you most commonly seeing with compliments or anything concerns from your followers about RV quality today?
No, great question. So diving right into that, I post a video about 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week of actual RV reviews. Everything else I do is typically focused around truck reviews or accessories, things like that. Whereas my RV reviews are a lot different in some ways than Josh. Josh has a very kind of comprehensive view of when he goes through an RV. Mine is kind of like that tour of somebody who's walking onto a dealership lot, walking onto an RV, first glance of everything they see. Most people don't realize that when I go do an RV tour, I have never been in many of these RVs before in my life. I'm walking on there, giving you a completely blank, unviewed opinion of what I'm seeing as I'm seeing it. And I've always tried to hold to that. So what does that mean? That means I walk on dealership lots, and sometimes there's things that are broken on RVs. Fire extinguishers knocked over, doors that won't close, trim that's falling down. I see this stuff. And in most cases, I realize that the RV I'm looking at this specific moment may not be the same condition as the exact same model number RV that you might go to another dealership and see. It may not have gone over the same horrible road conditions. It may not have experienced the same hell that the one I'm walking on specifically has gone through. So I do my best to try to make everything look very fair and neutral, because again, I could walk onto, let's say, an Alliance, and I could have a really, really bad experience. But then you walk onto the same floor plan at a dealership near you who may have PDI'd it, done extra work to make sure it was great, and it looks good. So I'm trying to deliver the most unbiased, the most neutral approach to reviewing an RV. And when I post it, the sense I get from my viewers, for the most part, are folks who just want to see what a floor plan looks like. They want to see what's new in this specific brand, what they're doing, what the colors look like, what the technology looks like, what's going on with it. But then there's a percentage of folks that will jump in and just call it junk. It's all junk. Everything is junk. It's going to fall apart. The worst investment you could ever make. Heaven forbid people think that you're investing in time with your family and not necessarily a piece of equipment that you're buying, right? So there's this feeling in some cases, especially from folks who have had a bad experience with their RV, that the entire industry is trying to cover up crap. They're trying to put stuff out, make it as quickly as possible, get it off the assembly line on a dealership lot, and they absolutely do not care about the end result, what that thing looks like and what it's going to be like for the person who gets it. So the question you're asking me, and I'm only answering that part of it, is what do my viewers feel about it? What am I hearing? I'm hearing that there are quality issues that need to be addressed. I'm hearing that all the way down the line, from the point the RV is manufactured to the point it hits an RV dealership lot, there needs to be an improvement in terms of overall quality. But then I also have other opinions that we'll discuss later on, but that's what I hear.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be the norm, that what I've been seeing in comments and all that. Josh, what do you have to I guess, add on to that, or differences you might know?
Yeah, somebody early on in the comments scroll, which, man, the comment section is on fire today. It's hard to keep up. But I think somebody said it best, at least as I've seen it from the perspective of my audience, because that's what we're talking about here, is that it really varies by brand. There are, without question, like a Saturn was built not the same as a Cadillac, but they're both GM products. So every manufacturer, well, not every, many manufacturers have up and down lines. And there are some that are absolutely not intended to be the best built thing. The hardest part is the way that everything is presented. It's always presented as this is the best. Every RV is the best, from all these different marketing avenues. And as a result, I think that there's a lot of overpromise, underdeliver. So I think the overall sentiment of the audience and marketplace is that, yeah, you're buying a bag of potato chips. You're buying a product that is broken, but you like it so much you're still going to try to enjoy it. And I think that the potato chip analogy is probably the best analogy there. The difference is you can still fully enjoy a broken bag of potato chips, but you can't fully enjoy a broken RV. So it's not a perfect metaphor. But I think it's pretty clear just to acknowledge that a lot of people feel like things could be better. There's some brands that seem to do better than others, but even still, there's always at least that one person like, well, am I on a different planet? Mine sucked, but everyone else is acting like this is the greatest thing. Am I nuts? You know, there's always, sadly, that one.
Yeah. So like what kind of adding on to that, Josh, do you think the public's perception matches reality, or is there actually a disconnect between customers' expectations and what manufacturers are actually delivering?
I think there can be. It's again, going back to the Saturn and the Cadillac analogy, using like say a GM family as an analogy. A lot of times I'll see a comment like name any brand. I'm just gonna, the first one that's on the tip of my tongue right now is just Forest River for whatever reason. But people will say Forest River's junk. What Forest River? How do you like? It's whenever I see a comment like that that has no, like, okay, how did we get here? Like I don't know what to do with that, because it could just, anybody could be saying it, you know, and we don't know why. I've talked to a lot of people who don't even know what manufacturer actually, like I've had people say I had a bad experience with my KZ reflection. That doesn't match, you know. So there's just a disconnect in there. There are they're like the brand that I always go back to is like, if you look at like a Rockwood or a Riverstone, those are Forest River products, and they're generally viewed as very well, and they're some of the only products in this entire industry that have like repeat comeback buyer loyalty. That's a very rare thing in this business. And then there's some other things made under the same company banner that they're not made by the same people in the same facility with the same processes, with the same management, with the same materials, but it says Forest River on it. So, you know, it from a customer's perspective, it all looks the same to them, even though it's not all the same. It'd be like if you got to open a restaurant called Dairy Queen that wasn't Dairy Queen, and you sold cheap junk. It's not the same, but it still says Dairy Queen, so it screws people up.
Yeah, JD, what do you think about like public perception? Are you seeing the same like correlation that Josh is?
I do, for the most part. I do, and I think where we run into problems as consumers is anytime we spend money that we've earned on something, we expect perfection. Whether it's food, whether it's a TV, whether it's your smartphone, or whether it's an RV, we know we worked hard for that money, and if we're going to let it go for something, we don't want that thing to be crap. We don't want it to be horrible. So the perception of anybody should be, I'm getting what I paid for. When you go and eat a steak, if you have a horrible steak and you have to pay $50 for that steak, you're going to be really upset about it. And you're expecting the next best thing. But the reality is there's a lot of times I go eat a $50 steak and it's terrible. It's not cooked right. I get the same customer service issues. I get the same problems with it. I think sometimes we've been bred to believe that when we pay for something, we're getting perfection, regardless of how it's made. The fact that hands have to put this thing together, it's not all robotic. A good way of kind of explaining this, and kind of like the potato chip and the Saturn side of it, is I also review vehicles. So I'm reviewing a truck. I can do a review on a Ford, and no matter what I say about it, people are going to hate it. People are going to say it's junk. I'm a Ram owner. I'm a Toyota owner. I'm a Nissan owner. I'm a Chevy GMC owner. And they'll hate it and call it junk only because of the brand. But the reality is when you ask and you dig in, why don't you like that Ford? It's because their grandpa's grandpa had a Ford that broke down in 1953 and hated Ford ever since. And the lineage of that is permeated into the youth today, that it's a bad product because I had somebody in my family had one 50 years ago and it was horrible. Or you may have had a bad experience 30 years ago or 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, and you don't give that product another opportunity to redeem itself. We run into this all the time, and RVs are different. Because RVs, in my opinion, I don't want to give it a pass. I'm not going to say I give it a pass, but what I will do is anybody who's walked an RV manufacturing factory knows that there's very, very, very little automation, if any. And to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever seen any true automation in an RV factory. air guns that have to be dialed in. It's pieces of wood. It's pieces of Asdel. It's pieces of material that are all being hand assembled by a lot of people. And there is a lot of room for mistakes to happen. And they do happen. And I expect the manufacturer to step up and fix those mistakes when it happens and fix the process. And we all know that there's PDIs and things that take place to try to address those issues. But the reality of viewers is actually an accurate reality. If you believe RVs are junk, you're probably basing that off of something that either happened to you, something that's happened with your RV, something that you're personally experiencing, and you hate the entire industry because, like Josh said, you think it's Forest River, not realizing that every division under Forest River has their own general manager, their own PDI, their own process of ensuring the product they put out meets their criteria. I know that he mentioned a couple of them like Riverstone and Flagstaff and Rockwood, phenomenal brands, but I guarantee you there's probably a forum of folks who even complain about them, even though they're actually built really well. Another example would be Palomino Paws, an absolutely insanely well-built product. The price matches that, but the reality of it is it's built at a pace and at a degree that really is what people want. But if they had that, they'd never be able to afford getting into an RV, and they wouldn't have an RV to even shop for because they're built in such low quantity.
Yeah. And there's like like you said, they're expecting perfect, right? There's always a comparison between like RVs and probably automotive or even RVs and residential, right? But if you put a residential home on wheels, I mean, there's going to be problems with it. It just is what it is. And then you add into the fact that it's man-made going down a line, several people touching it, people, didn't have enough coffee that day or had a bad night before. I mean, things happen. There's a whole lot of things that go into an RV being made versus like a car being made, which is just computers going down the line. It's a totally different idea. But
so
JD,
real quick,
go ahead, Josh.
Let's say real quick, one thing I want to add, just I don't necessarily disagree with anything that is said, but I think that people could get the perception from what we're saying that we're saying we necessarily feel that it's okay. And I don't know that it is. I think the reason a lot of people feel this way is that perhaps too often there still are the problems. And I want to acknowledge that. I want to say, real quick, I'll just put myself on the line out there. I don't feel necessarily that the average RV rolling in the lot is as problem-free as it could or should be. And I just want to acknowledge that part of the perspective real quick, because I don't know that everything is necessarily as bad as it's always painted, but I don't think it's as good as it necessarily should be. And I don't necessarily want the audience viewing this to think that everyone is condoning it's exactly how it should be. You should enjoy your broken bag of potato chips. I don't think the bag should be broken. I think you should understand what the bag is made of and what's in it so that you understand what the dollars represent, because that's the disconnect for me right there, is that expectations don't match reality too often.
Yeah, and you have a really interesting perspective, Josh, and we'll come back to it. We'll hop to JD for this one. But JD, from your perspective, has RV quality improved, stayed the same, or gotten worse over the years since you've been the expert in the industry that you have been? And what examples or trends have you noticed to support that view?
So this is an interesting one for me, because if I go back, since I've been doing YouTube for 8 years, and I look at even 8 years ago, which is pre-COVID, and I look at one of the first towable RVs that we had, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think anything has gone down. Now, if I jump back 15, 20 years, which I can't do because I wasn't doing this then, but even then, when I look at the products that came out 15, 20 years, I don't see any crazy improvements of products back then versus today. Let me give you an example. When we bought our Forest River Vibe travel trailer, which was our first towable travel trailer, it had Luan walls on the inside and outside. It was an Asdel. It had no underbelly protection to it. It had one air conditioning unit. It had a lack of just about anything nice or fancy inside of it. And the second RV we got, towable, was a fifth wheel. It was a Coachman Chaparral. And that had Asdel on the outside of it. It had much better construction overall. It had a 12-inch I-beam frame, upgraded suspension. It had the Dexter Easy Flex suspension on it. It had G-rated, no, I'm sorry, that one did not have G-rated tires. It was a move that we made later, but it had a lot more tech. It had 2 air conditioning units, things that weren't available or weren't thought of with our first unit yet. And they were both roughly in the same price category for what they were. So as I've seen RVs hit the market every single year after year after year, I see improvements in terms of the things they're putting in them. I see improvements in terms of the materials that they're using. The challenge that we've seen is the fact that things have gotten worse because demand went insane during COVID. And when demand ramped up and the manufacturers couldn't meet that demand and equipment was hard to get in, factory floors, entire lines were shut down when one person got sick. You dealt with this entire supply chain issue, which forced them to move people around to try to get units out during a period of time when everybody wanted to buy an RV. So I guarantee you, RVs took a huge quality hit during COVID. They took a big hit, not because it was an intentional thing, but because they were trying to get units out. They wanted to get units on dealership lots, and they were trying to give inventory to folks to have a choice to actually go out and buy stuff. That said, though, the trend to me is that they're using better materials, that they're equipping them better. They're paying far more attention to the decor, the paint, the colors, what things look like. They're adding more luxury amenities. They're including things like 2 and 3 air conditioning units, which they never have. The price has gotten significantly higher, but the overall assembly quality, the process of assembling the units, I think is largely unchanged for most of the manufacturers. I believe that there are some that are standouts they demand a price for that, such as Brinkley and some of those other brands that are much, much higher price, but they do things differently. But I don't think the assembly process has changed in a long time. So I honestly couldn't tell you that things have gotten worse. I think that they're trying to assemble them the same way, but in much, much greater quantities.
Okay. Yeah. You brought up the idea, the topic of COVID, and we're going to hop into that because that was a supply and demand. I mean, there's like, okay, everyone's working from home, working remote. They can go out and camp more, or they can, whatever, they can take it on the road and go. But before we move on to that, let's talk, Josh, what is your perspective? And has quality improved over, gotten worse? What are the trends you've seen? Basically same question. Let's hear what you have to say.
I guess the answer is I've seen it up and down. I will say from my personal seat, I've never seen it where I think it should be. I've always had basically the impression for my going on now 16 years of doing this from multiple different manufacturers that my dealership's service bay is effectively many of their like final finish PDI service bays. And it varies by brand, of course, but I think, again, more often than not, a manufacturer is able to leverage the fact that if we push it out the door slightly unfinished, perhaps the dealer will just kind of pick up some of that stuff and to get that fixed, maybe not on our dime. Being so close to Elkhart County like I am, I meet more people, I think. And I'll never say where this guy came from, but he flat out said, he was told when he was managing his production line that it's if something's defective, it's cheaper to have the dealer fix it than for them to fix it themselves at the facility. And that right there, it's a brand that we no longer do business with, but they're not the only ones to be guilty of that necessarily. But there are some excellent things. There's some brands that again do that I would personally purchase. And that's kind of my thing is like, okay, so would you personally buy that brand? Would you put your money on the line? And there's some that I would and some that I probably wouldn't, but it also depends on how I'm going to camp, where I'm going to camp, what the expectation is. And again, I go back to that. There's this massive problem and disconnect that people are led to believe this stupid dream of how you can use all of these things infinitely with zero problems, and many of them are absolutely not made for that. But that's a whole different rabbit hole to go down.
Well, Josh, I know we spoke before. I mean, we've been colleagues for a little while, but I had one thing. I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but you did say one time to me, it's like, RVs are built to do, and they're intended to do a job. And there's typically that job is like, well, they're not all of them are meant to be lived in 365, right? They're meant to be like that weekend warrior thing. Would you expand on that, or are you comfortable with expanding on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I kind of talked about that in my frame flex video. That's one of the things where I feel like the industry as a whole has had borderline predatory marketing. And there's a lot of things, like there's a lot of these really cute close words like warranty for full-time RVing. Like you just said, some of them are not rated to be lived in 365. None of them are. None of them have a full-time living warranty or designation. Some of them have a full-time RVing warranty or designation, which may or may not even have a definition. It could have absolutely zero definition. Each RV is made for a specific purpose. It's made with this RV is engineered with an expectation of maybe it's only intended to be used 2 weekends a year. That is the expectation of some brands, but they are sold to people as though, yeah, no, you can live in this full time. And to say that you're even burning your candle at both ends that way, you're breaking it in half and throwing the thing in a fireplace. But I have this suspicion that information is understood in the engineering room, and then it gets left on the cutting room floor once it goes through the marketing filter. Because if we tell people the reality of it, they may not be inclined to spend their money, and it ends up, again, just never being shared to a customer. And that information, like even as someone who's done this as long as I have, I really can't tell you, because it's never going to be disclosed to me, what brands are built with an expectation of how much use or how many miles. That information is never shared with anybody anywhere. But the rhetoric is pushed to the dealership level, which is then pushed down to the customer level. And the expectation is up here, even though the usage expectation, the design expectation is down here,
Yeah, I'd love to kind of chime in on this as well. As someone who started off as a weekend warrior and is still a weekend warrior, not a full-timer, never claimed to be. But the reality of it is when I did research and found out that RVs are typically used, I'm not saying they're designed to be used this way, but they're typically used 2 to 4 times a year by a family. Which means if you're a full-timer and you're traveling all across the country, I see so many of these vlogs from YouTube personalities that, okay, we're going to be here next week. Then the next week we'll be here. Follow us as we travel here. Follow us as we travel here. They're filling in every state on the map on the side of their RV. And before you know it, they have 25, 30,000 miles on an RV in 1 year. And things will start to break. And they most of the time will go over things as they break, things that happen. The reality, though, is if an RV, from an RV manufacturing perspective, is designed to be used, let's just say 4 to 6 times a year, as the average RVer uses it about that often, what happens when you use it 12 to 24 times a year, or 24 to 36 times a year? What happens when you put well over 10,000 miles on it? The reality is you're subjecting it to much more use than a manufacturer may have assumed that you're going to use it, because 90% of folks who RV only use their RV 2 to 4 times a year. So the warranty claims, the issues are happening to mainly folks who use their RV beyond that, folks who spend a lot more time in it, folks who may full-time in it, folks who may keep it out at a piece of property and use it as a recreational home on the weekends or a getaway cabin. We're seeing a lot more destination style RVs appear now because they're trying to capture that affordable home market and try to get you into one of those versus perhaps a tiny home or a mobile home or something else. And when you see an RV lifestyle and you see, man, I walk through this thing is absolutely gorgeous. Look at what it is. Most consumers, I'm not saying the folks that follow our channels. If you follow our channels, you're probably a bit more informed because we're constantly putting this in front of you. But most consumers who walk an RV dealership lot only care about what the interior looks like. They only care about that sofa, how big the TV is. Does it have a fireplace? Look at the colors. Does it have, marble countertops? Does it have really nice linoleum floors? They don't even pay attention to the Asdel sticker on the side. They don't pay attention to the G-rated tires. They don't pay attention to the suspension. So some manufacturers take all that stuff out because they don't think it even matters when it comes to selling an RV. They're not contenting it with stuff that makes it last longer on the road. They're putting stuff on the inside that a lot of people care about. Now, here's the thing. Somebody made a comment a little earlier, lipstick on a pig. But the reality behind this is if you're looking for that lipstick, then you're going to pick that pig. And if you're not educating yourself on the things that you need to look for that will make an RV last longer on the road, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, because there are brands and manufacturers out there who may say, instead of putting $10,000 into the interior of this RV by giving you a 65-inch TV and giving you all this fancy stuff, we're putting most of that money into the structure. We're putting more of that money into the suspension. Rockwood Flagstaff, great example of that. Torsion suspension, doing really, really good things. Look at the door, and you'll see all the things that they do to their RV that a lot of other manufacturers don't do. And if you don't care because all you care about is a super nice interior, that's what you're directing your money towards. You're paying for that super fancy interior, and you might actually be paying less for a fancier interior, which means that there's stuff on the outside that's just completely being omitted. So whenever I do my reviews, I focus heavily on what type of suspension does it have? What type of tires does it have? What type of sidewall construction does it have? What does the frame look like? I look at this stuff because those are choices that an RV manufacturer can make to give you a product that might be better built, that might work a little better, might last you a little longer. And if you're not looking for that stuff, I feel you're doing yourself a huge value disservice. You're basically saying, I care more about the looks than anything else. And you're buying lipstick on a pig versus just getting a really, really good looking built functional RV.
I don't necessarily disagree, but I do think that dealerships need to accept some responsibility for their part in the equation too. It always reminds me of the Spider-Man meme where there's the three Spider-Mans pointing at each other. One's customers, one dealers, one's manufacturers. And it seems like a lot of times dealers want to kind of step back and go, hey, the manufacturer did it. Sorry. But dealerships as a whole, us, everybody as a whole, customers come to us and they're asking those questions. How is this built? What is this? And I think all too often the average dealership as a whole in the nation doesn't fulfill that fiduciary responsibility to properly educate their customer because maybe they won't buy it. Using the auto industry kind of as a reference, like we take seatbelts for granted, but man, the auto industry lobbied hard against them. They didn't want people to think that cars were dangerous. That could hurt sales. It's a different scenario, but it's the same reaction that you see persisting through the industry. And again, I don't agree with it. I understand how it's there. I try to do my part to help people navigate that water better, but it's dicey water sometimes, man. Like someone said over here in the comments when I was talking about full-time RV, they said, well, they shouldn't advertise them as full-time living. The manufacturers don't, but they use the words to make you think they do. And like JD was talking about influencer partnerships, a lot of times RV manufacturers won't directly say, yes, you can go in this and you can tow it every weekend and you can use it 12 months a year. But there are a lot of factory sponsorships of third-party influencers. So effectively, they're indirectly sponsoring that illusion of a dream that this thing can be used all you want. And again, it's, I think, very much on the laps of dealers to try to be better than that.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot more we can go into this. And yes, the manufacturers do have some issues and the dealers take some issues. And then obviously they pass on to the customer. The dealerships need to take up, but so do the manufacturers as well. They need to take ownership of that. And they do the PDI as well. Everyone does a PDI. Even the dealerships do that as well. But things are missed. People are doing this. People make mistakes. I think we kind of wrapped up section 1. That kind of makes sense of everything. If you guys haven't seen that, this will get posted so you can rewatch it. But everyone out there watching on it, please let us know in the chat if you were liking this by typing 100 or B2B RV or Josh the RV or whatever it may be. Just let us know that you're liking this thing, because we'd love to keep doing these, and your support means the most to us. So, guys, we talked about COVID. Let's hop into the COVID campers. Are they a real thing? During the pandemic, the RV industry really faced an overwhelming surge of demand. And JD, you really brought this up in section 1 here. But with that, do you think that really made the wrap production really compromised? You said it did. So JD, let's kind of go with you here first. Do you think that the term COVID campers is fair? Were the RVs produced during the pandemic really built differently or with lower quality compared to pre-pandemic models?
So I'm going to answer this based off of experience that I had dealing with RV manufacturers during COVID. Okay. I would call some of my dealer contacts and I would say, hey, what's the status of this new floor plan that you're supposed to be coming out with? And they say, we're at a dead stop right now. We had somebody get sick on the floor, the entire floor, every station around them had to go home. We have nobody on the factory floor that can actually do this next station. So I'm like, okay, what's going on? When are you going to get back online? Well, we have 2 weeks now that we got to wait before we can get production back online. And now we're moving people around. So we have somebody who may have been putting flooring down, now putting sidewalls on, now putting the roofing material on. So you had people who were jumping around to different stations trying to facilitate jobs that folks just weren't able to do because they were out on COVID. And the rules around the spacing that you needed between people and stations was very real during COVID. If you hated it, if you don't believe in it, if you think that it was all, a hype of government conspiracy, you may think that, but the reality is on the factory floor, people weren't working. People were going home. Factories were slowing down production, while at the same time, they weren't getting materials coming in. There was a shortage of Asdel, a chemical plant that they used for laminating sidewalls had to shut down because they had a fire. These things happened. And when those things happen, they got to pivot. That's one of the reasons why Asdel became such a big thing on dealerships or on RV manufacturers during COVID, because Asdel was a US manufactured product and it was available. So a lot of manufacturers said, you know what, we'll just spend the extra money on Asdel, start implementing it on our units now. And that's why you saw such a huge move towards Asdel by manufacturers, because they couldn't get Lou on board out of Asia. So air conditioning units, same thing. A lot of these air conditioning units get shipped in from China. A lot of them come from overseas. A lot of the components that are on RVs come from overseas, regardless of the brand that it is. And when that was effectively shut down for a while, manufacturers struggle. Now, there were 2 types of manufacturers that struggled. There were manufacturers that struggled but still tried to do the right thing. They would wait until a unit was complete. They would do proper PDI. They would inspect, do the right things, and then they would ship it out. And then there were some manufacturers that didn't do that. They relied on the dealership to essentially be the last leg of assembly of these RVs. I had several RV dealerships that I did reviews at where I would see a unit sitting in their yard with no AC on it. And they're like, well, we're waiting for the AC to come in so we can install it here at a dealership, which is absurd. The reality behind this is COVID units, it's fair to call them COVID campers, but that doesn't necessarily mean every single one of them can be labeled that. Again, many manufacturers slowed down production. They took the time to do things right. And in many ways, it allowed them to kind of do a Kaizen event at their shop of trying to streamline it and do more with less. But the challenge a lot of folks are dealing with now is a lot of companies went to materials and suppliers that they had never worked with before, picked up new lines to assemble these RVs, and you run into scenarios where they just don't have a heck of a lot of experience with it. I remember when I was collaborating with Coachman and their fifth wheel line, I was talking to the manufacturer of their roofing material, and he said, you know what, I've been working with the Coachman folks for this number of years, and it's the same roofing folks that have been there for the last 15 years. They know how to put a good roof on. But then I talked to another manufacturer that says we just switched to a different material because we can't get it from our previous supplier. They're not getting it right now. And we have new people trying to install a new material on a roof that they've never done before. So they're still trying to get the product out. A perfect example of this, I'm not going to say the brand, but it was a toy hauler manufacturer. I went into it middle of summer, super hot down here, and they decided to put a real, I don't know if it was stainless steel tile backsplash. Josh probably knows the brand if he thinks about it, around their kitchen area. but the heat gets to it down here. And it was just all crumbling off the wall on a brand new unit that I walked into on a dealership lot. So I actually called the manufacturer and I said, I just filmed this whole unit. I get to the kitchen and you have all this tile that's just literally peeling off the wall and falling on the countertops. And they said, we realized that. We switched to a new adhesive company, and it just, we're finding out it doesn't hold up very well in 130-degree temperature down in South Texas. So we're going to have to switch to another company to get it right. So as companies jump around to find suppliers, especially during COVID, I feel as if there were many, many instances where they made some poor decisions. They picked up suppliers that they've never worked with before. They lacked experience on how to install and how to put some of these things in. And then they also were moving people around so much on the factory floor to try to fill in for people who were out, that yes, if you bought a unit during COVID, you have a higher likelihood, or you had a higher likelihood of getting a unit that had odd, strange problems that just weren't really something you would have expected prior to then or even now.
Interesting. This thing's out of the norm. They had to pivot, right? They had to you couldn't get stuff overseas, like you were saying. You had to pivot to something else, and that obviously going to cause issues. People don't have the experience with those said parts or said manufacturers outside of their own. So, Josh, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, playing the law of averages, it was a real thing. I saw, but there were these weird exceptions. So somebody earlier in the comments said, hey, it's too bad Josh works for a dealership and he can't name names. I'm going to, and maybe I'll get some backlash on this, but we're doing it live like Bill O'Reilly over here. So a brand that I like a lot is Cougar. I've said they're some of my personal favorite campers in various categories sometimes. And pre-COVID, we had a higher frequency of challenges with them than I was comfortable with. And then my home dealership, we really depended on them for good business. And I was really like, oh man, this is going to get messy. And they rose to the occasion, like almost nobody else. And yes, there's going to be that guy's like, are you crazy? I had a bad Cougar. I believe you. But for the most part, I think they shined and they did the best I'd ever seen during that period. Now I want to flip side this. I cut my teeth on Jayco RVs, and they're always going to be kind of near and dear to my heart a little bit. And Jay Feather, White Hawk, they were gold level DSI award winners year after year, just like asleep at the wheel. They were on average doing a better job than most brands. And a thing happened, like this insane calamity of errors happened. Kind of like GD was saying, there's just this it just got so messy. But Jay Feather and White Hawk used to be built in the same plant. And then they each got their own plant. But when that happens in the RV industry, and I'm not saying I agree with this is just what happens. You take half the people from plant A and you put them over in plant B, and then you backfill the rest of the positions. And the problem is 50% of your staff is not extremely experienced, and that shows. And during that COVID period, when manufacturers would run into supply shortages and they'd shut down 2 or 3 days, your factory staff is not getting paid when they're not working. Well, these are people who, they're like, dude, I got to have a job. I got to have a paycheck. So I guess I got to quit here and I got to go find a different manufacturer to work at for a couple weeks or something like that. And as a result, the turnover rate in some of these factories were high. And I have so much respect for brands, again, like Jay Feather, White Hawk. And during that period, there was definitely a higher number of those with challenges than normal, than I had ever really seen before. It has significantly improved since for some of the brands, and some of the brands that were doing well have since slipped. Your entire Jayco family of RVs was just, once again, across the board, they got the gold level DSI award. So they have put in the work, they've done the things, and they have gotten better. But there were some brands that were, who was it? I cannot remember the name of the brand, but they sent us an RV that had a central air system with no ducting routed. And then they sent us one that had non-centralized air with a bunch of holes cut in the ceiling where they were trying to find the centralized ducts, and they still sent those units to us. It was a laminated roof. We literally had to take the roof off the unit, but that still was sent to us. Then you have, I keep saying them, I'm not trying to sound like a broken record, but I am kind of a fanboy of them. And then you have brands like Rockwood that have been well respected for a long time and absolutely put in the effort to put out the best product I think they had ever put out during the hardest time the industry had ever really faced. So there were exceptions, but I think without question, it is absolutely fair to say the COVID camper thing was real. Now, like if you're the thing is, about every 2.5 to 5 years, you know, an RV that was new comes back into the marketplace in a trade-in. I think it is really, really important. I don't care if it's new or used, but especially if you're buying a used RV that's in that 5 to 6 year range window, I really recommend having an independent RV inspector go through that sucker. And it might be a couple $100, but man, it might save you a lot of grief, you know.
Yeah, and I want to kind of chime in on what you said. I fully endorse reaching out to an inspector. It's going to cost you some money, but just like a home inspection might save you from buying a home that needs a $30,000 roof on it, a RV inspection can save you a lot of money as well. I'll give you kind of a case in point here. So Josh is making a lot of great points about what took place during COVID. I talked about what took place during COVID. What you don't know is how folks reacted to a problem unit that they had. Did they get it fixed, or did they try to get out of it? And if they bought a unit during COVID, again, prices were astronomically high. They're still really high, but they jumped and spiked so high during COVID that people were willing to pay them, finance them for 20 years, get an RV just because it was what's available, and hope that they had a good experience because they've never owned an RV before. They thought it was the same as going out and buying an SUV, that it's, for the most part, these things are built awesome. And they didn't do a ton of research. So they got into an RV that probably cost them 20, 30, 40 grand more than it would have cost them 2 years prior. Out of the haste decision a lot of people make, where they're like, we need to get into this RV lifestyle. Let's get away from other folks. Let's have our own vacation. And they realized a couple things. One, it's a little bit more difficult than they thought. The process of towing, the process of unhitching, the process of hooking up your black tanks, your gray tank, getting everything set up, getting your water, and then leveling your RV. And then they're like, well, this is cool, but now they're having some problems. Now the financial aspect comes in, and they're like, we're not using this the way we thought, or we can't afford it anymore. So they get out of it. In the past, 10 years ago, when you bought a used RV, there was a romance period there where you were like, man, this is cool. Look what all these crazy cool things that the previous owner did. They put all these cool accessories on here. They fixed every possible problem that this thing had, and I am buying a unit that's better than new. But that's not necessarily the case when you buy a unit that was sold to someone during COVID. Not saying that it's bad, not saying that you're buying something horrible, but it is absolutely worth the cost of getting an inspector to come out. And most inspectors, if they're ethical, once they inspect the RV, they're not permitted to work on it for a year. So a lot of inspection companies are that way. And that's just kind of an ethical thing to make sure that they're not just telling you, they're not the HVAC company who says, hey, your condenser's broken or your relay's broken. I have one. I just happen to have the right one in my truck. So it's really, really important that you really do the research if you're buying something pre-owned, especially if it was sold during COVID. But I'm going to tell you what I truly, truly think. I think there's a couple things. I think that RV manufacturers should absolutely increase the warranty period of RVs. I really do think that. I think that RV manufacturers should also reimburse dealerships at a higher cost to repair RVs that are damaged or RVs that arrive in a condition that's not acceptable. I truly believe that the disservice right now to you, the consumer, is that the RV dealership is having to do the vast majority of the things that the RV manufacturer should have done. They're not being reimbursed at a rate that's fair, and you're not getting the length of warranty that you should be getting on an RV. I truly think that you should have more like a 3 to 5 year warranty on an RV, but at the same time, being very careful in terms of what that warranty truly covers. Because as we talked about earlier in this video, most people are weekend warriors that use their RV 2 to 4 times a year. So if you're that 24 to 30 time a year user, you are absolutely going to experience a much higher likelihood of components breaking, components failing, things just not lasting as long as you would hope they would last. Somebody asked a comment or left a comment a minute ago saying it doesn't seem like RVs last more than 5 years. Well, the reality is, my RV, we've probably used it, gosh, I'm going to say between 30 and 40 times since we've had it since 2021. It's in absolutely fantastic condition. The wiring looks like a mess inside of it, but as long as the wiring isn't like grounding on a screw or something, for the most part, I don't worry about that. I've let people follow that journey of me cleaning some of that stuff up. It's kind of a cool feeling whenever you do some of that. But the reality is recently, for the first time ever, we got rats in our RV, the subfloor, and they got to wires and they ate through some wires. And I have videos coming out on this, what I found and repairing this stuff. And to a lot of folks, they might buy an RV, keep it out in a storage facility forever, and not even realize that it's not the manufacturer who screwed up. It's the fact that you're not spending time in it, taking care of it, and realizing that rats got to it, or that mold got in it, or it's not being ventilated properly. You have humidity issues. That there are things that, yes, are absolutely the manufacturer's fault, and they happened during COVID. They're happening today. But there are also things that you are not doing that you should be doing to allow your RV to last longer. And one of those is not treating it like it's an abandoned home when you're not using it.
So I want to address something I saw scrolling through the comment section. Someone said, why can't they make them out of all composites? Why can't they use it's a great question. They absolutely can. What I'm about to say, I think, is going to be a very hot take. I have been doing this a long time. I personally feel this, but the problem is not that manufacturers can't or won't use better materials or composites or all kinds of things. There's absolutely better things available. One of the challenges is that people are not willing to pay for it enough to make it a supportable business model. So what ends up happening is so many times it ends up being a race to the bottom, because where I say this is like when I have a small RV that is really made with really high quality materials. High quality materials come with a higher price tag. Somebody will look at a 20-foot all composite, all aluminum, absolutely fantastic built RV, highest quality RV you can imagine, and this little 20-foot thing costs 50 grand. And they go, 50 grand for that? You're out of your mind. And then they end up going to buy the cheapest trailer they can. And the problem is they still have a $50,000 expectation for their new $12,995 budget camper. And it's just like within the industry, people will say it doesn't matter if it's new or used. It's new to the customer, and they still have the same new RV expectations. And then we go back to where I don't think customers are properly educated on this. If a manufacturer, they absolutely can build something super high quality, but that requires that the dealerships and then the customers are all properly educated so they understand why it's that many dollars. And that doesn't happen. And there's also the people like me who camp once or twice a year for a weekend, twice if I'm lucky. I don't need something that built that I could hand down to my grandkids. I don't need that. And that cheaper stick and tin camper suits me perfectly. But I understand what I'm getting, what I'm not getting, and the expectation is there. But the problem is there's a disconnect between what this RV is intended for and how it is presented to the customer and how it sets their expectations. And that is that's a harder problem to solve because it requires everybody to get together, and it only takes one person who goes, yeah, but if I'm a little shifty about this, I could make some quick money real fast. And then it ends up being that race to the bottom. Build the cheapest thing as cheaply as you can and try to get as much money as you can for it.
Yep. You know, Josh, you make a really, really great point. And I think that a lot of folks sometimes, it's a great argumentative point people love to talk about in the comments. People are talking about here. I see somebody is talking about ATC being all aluminum composite. I see people talking about Airstream. People are talking about Australian brands. I did a video series at a dealership in Salt Lake that only sells off-road RVs. They sell several brands like Patriot, which comes out of Australia, Brunner, brands like that. And what I found out very quickly was a 13-foot Patriot was $70,000. And it was a soft-walled unit, and it didn't have a bathroom in it. If you want to talk about some of the best built RVs in North America, there are brands that are making some absolutely insanely built RVs in America. I'm going to say the most emerging brand that you've seen from a mainstream manufacturer like Forest River, to me, would be like the Palomino Pause. All composite, right? There's no wood in it at all if you get the main one, but you're paying $130,000 for a 25-foot travel trailer. And they're selling. But I can guarantee you, if the dealership near you, and I'm talking to the people watching this video, only had $100,000 to $200,000 RVs, that dealership might go out of business. So this is what I'm trying to explain, is that $20,000 RV that's sticking tin that people are going to scoff at and say needs to be built better, it's junk and all that, that RV provides the amenities, the space, and the living accommodations at a price point people can actually afford. The minute you start spiking in all these insanely awesome features like composite sidewalls and no wood and you know, things that you see in these high-end units, you can't afford them anymore. Brinkley is a brand that's constantly brought up as well. Brinkley is a fantastic product. I love the Brinkley product, but the reality is it's cost prohibitive for 90% of folks looking for fifth wheels, and they know it. When I talk to the folks at Brinkley, they're like, we know we're a heavy unit and we know we're an expensive unit. Not everyone can afford it. The vast majority of folks, and Josh, keep me honest here because you sell these things, but the vast majority of folks looking for a fifth wheel are typically these days looking in the $65,000 to $80,000 price point. Back 5 years ago, we're looking in the $40,000 to $65,000 price point, which doesn't even put them at half the cost of a Brinkley. So if Brinkley is doing it right and they're doing the right things, wiring harnesses and all that other stuff, look at what you have to pay to get into a Brinkley. That's what you have to realize. Brands like Jayco, brands like Forest River, brands, you know, like Montana, these brands that are constantly out there, they're trying to build you an RV that may look and feel very similar, but at a price point that's $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 less. So it meets the budgetary criteria of most people looking to buy an RV. If you can't afford it, it doesn't matter what it's made out of.
Yeah, and you guys bring up a lot of good points about this COVID campers. JD, you brought up the point, you know, there's parts bringing over because at 2020 we couldn't use those parts, so we had to shift that. So we had to shift to a different manufacturer for parts, and that caused another issue because we didn't have that, you know, couldn't get that stuff in, and they weren't experienced with that. But let's kind of try and wrap this up here on the COVID portion, number 2 section here, guys. Josh, let's go with you here. Are you seeing like major long-term effects here? Has things gotten better? Have manufacturers addressed those things? Do you think that manufacturers are learning lessons for the future of making RVs? And yeah, I mean, are you seeing a difference or a ripple effect at all?
So has the average fit and finish of the average RV that I see improved since the peak pandemic period? Yes. I'm going to say yes, but I do think it has. I tend to not look at the what, but the why. I think the biggest reason things have gotten better is just that demand has slowed down. We're not running into shortages. We have staff that is able to work more consistently. So we have people in the same factory doing the same job for a longer time, and we're getting a little bit more experience. Are they learning a lesson? I haven't been around this 50 years, but I've been around it long enough. I've seen a couple of things happen cyclically. I've seen 2 or 3 different massive overproduction periods where I've seen the same mistakes get made down the line because on the short term, it made some money. Here's a question no one's asked. If the whole world pandemic thing happened again, do we think the industry would repeat the same mistakes? and I hate what I'm about to say, and maybe it's because I will tell you I'm a fairly cynical person. I think it would. I think the industry would probably make the same mistakes, and I think that things are in a better state now than they were simply because things are slower. Now, I've been really, as I've been putting out these like, hey, we're going to do a live stream. Everybody tune into this as I've been hyping this event up. There's a fellow named Todd St. John's who says, I'm a RV transporter. And one of the things I've noticed is that over the past 4 years or something like that, when an RV delivery driver shows up to a dealership, there's a thing, a DAF, a dealer acceptance form, where we go through and we find all the things that we can and we write them down. And he said that some of these places, they were filling up the form and flipping over the back and writing on the back and having to photocopy that. And he says, and it's getting shorter and shorter to the point that they don't fill a full paragraph anymore. And I have seen that. I have seen things be better, not perfect, not to the level that I think they necessarily should be, but I do think things are better. But I don't think they're better for the right reason. I think on average, they're better because it got slower, not because we as the industry got better at doing it. I don't love that. I hate that answer. That really, you can hear it. I'm not happy with that, but that is my personal feeling.
JD, what do you have to add on that?
I feel the same way. Things have slowed down. Things are getting better for a couple of reasons. They're getting better because there's more vocal folks who have RVs experiencing problems and taking to social media, getting on forums. And to be honest with you guys, I know that people mention like HBRV and some of these other YouTube channels. I watch a lot of these channels. They're great channels. A lot of them focus purely on things that are problematic in the industry, which I have no problem with, because if it's not for some of these channels focusing on it, there's not going to be a heck of a lot of motion and need and requirement for these companies to step up their game or to fix little things. A brand that I like a lot, Alliance, they're not perfect. They're not even close to perfect. They are a newer brand, and they are doing things right in many ways. But at the same time, if you buy one, you're still likely going to have a list of issues that you're going to have to deal with at some point. Not that it's bad. Hopefully you get taken care of the way you feel you should get taken care of with it. But at the end of the day, you're buying a box that's rattling itself down the road, and things get better because you complain about it. And that's a good thing. When you, as the consumer, complain about these problems, believe it or not, things get better. When you post videos about it, things get better. The manufacturers listen to this stuff because channels that have a couple thousand subscribers can go viral when they show a problem with their RV. And the manufacturers focus on that stuff, just like Josh dropping whatever he just dropped. Things happen. And
that was perfect timing.
Yeah. But
that was this guy attacking. He's got to go.
But the reality behind this is that, yes, things are getting better because you all are demanding it and because you're making a big deal. And here's someone saying right here, I'm saying they're talking about the automotive industry. Guys, just hope that the RV industry is never regulated to the degree the automotive industry is. If it is, you will never be able to afford one. You'll never be able to afford one. Sure, they're going to be built really nice for the few manufacturers who survive. But the reality of it is the amount of automation that goes into building a vehicle, even a cheap vehicle, is insanely more regulated, insanely more stringent, and the fit and finish required to do it through the machinery and through the robotics is something no RV manufacturer does. Not one RV manufacturer. Even if you look at some of these new brands like Lightship, or you look at some of these insanely expensive high-end brands, they're still all assembled by hand. They might be using automotive techniques or automotive style assembly lines, but it's still people putting this stuff together. And the minute you try to take an RV and build it to the same level, fit and finish, detailed, and engineering that goes into a vehicle, which if you guys have followed my channel, you might realize that my channel is split between viewers. I have people who come to my channel for the automotive side, and I have people who come to my channel for the RV side. When I do an automotive reveal of any brand, any truck, there's like 10 engineers just for the chassis division, and 10 engineers for the engine and powertrain division, and 10 engineers for the interior exterior division, and 5 engineers for the headlights. They spend billions of dollars making one model year change that the RV industry never has to deal with. And to try to integrate that type of regulation, that type of engineering, and that type of build into an RV would make every RV $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. It's not possible to do it given the size, given what most of them are built out of, but more importantly, given what people are willing to pay for them.
That brings up a lot of good points because the automation, I mean, they would be astronomically priced. I mean, I can just think of one, it's not automated nor probably goes down the line, but like the one that someone brought up, ATC earlier, it's fully aluminum. I mean, you walk in a thing, it's spit, shine, clean, right? Yeah, it's expensive, but they don't kick out millions of them. Or like Airstream. Airstream's got basically like a private jet feel to them. You walk into them and they're expensive for a reason, in my opinion. But does that kind of wrap up everything? You guys have anything you want to add on to the COVID campers before we go into the customer experience and what's being done?
Just 2 more seconds on what you just said. You brought up ATC. I'm a big fan of ATC, right? Aluminum trailers. They are well built. They use Asdel outside, inside. It's a great product. All aluminum frame. But this is going to surprise a lot of folks. Yes, the materials are different, but the way it's constructed is still very conventional. It's still very similar to the rest of the industry. They're just using different materials. Now, the price that you pay for an ATC is because of those different materials. And as many folks on here are going to say, if you want something high quality, go get an ATC. Well, that might completely push out the person looking for a $50,000 RV or $60,000 or $70,000 RV, where they can go and buy a Jayco, an Eagle, they can go and buy a Forest River, this or the Heritage Glen, or they can go buy this product for that amount of money. If they're like, you know what, everybody in the comment section said, I need to go look at ATC if I want real quality. Well, you better bring $150,000 with you, because that's what it's going to take to get into a unit with no slides. So you have to be very conscious of making a recommendation that somebody buy a certain brand because of its quality, because of what they do, realizing that not everyone can afford those brands. They can't. It's just not financially feasible. These companies survive because they're very slow building an RV. They're meticulous. They don't produce very many of them, and they charge a huge price for them. But what you're looking for most of the times is the guy going to the dealership lot that's between 1 and 50 miles away from me. I got a $50,000 budget. That's all my family can afford to spend on this thing. We're going to finance it. I can't look at ATC. I can't look at Brinkley. I can't look at DRV. I can't look at Riverstone. I can't even look at higher end Cougars. I can't even look at higher end Jaycos. They're out of my price range. What can I get for that price point? And what you're going to see is you actually get a lot. Just be aware that they're mass produced, and you will possibly have a few more issues. And hopefully you're going to deal with the dealership network like Bish, who's going to try their best to take care of all those issues before you pull it off of the lot.
And thank you for that. Josh, anything you want to add before we move on?
I think we're cooked.
We're cooked on that one.
Yeah.
All righty, guys. Real quick before we kind of move into the last section here. I mentioned a free gift earlier, and well, here it is. We want you to be notified every time that we do a live stream here at Bish's, and we have a newsletter called The Route, whatever you want to say. If you sign up for it just for being part of this live event today, we're going to also send you a free copy of our ebook called RV Dealer Secrets, this service edition. This ebook contains 30 of the most common DIY fixes for your RV that will help you save money with your RV. So that link will be dropped in the description here shortly, and you can guys do that because you can save time and money doing that. So section number 3, everybody, we're going to talk about the customer experience and anything being done to change the customer experience from what we talked about so far. So a common thread of the discussion about RV quality is the customer experience, but both by the purchase and after sales support. So many feel that there is I guess this is where the industry can improve the most. So let's start with JD. JD, are manufacturers and dealerships doing something to address the concerns about build quality and service? And what improvements have you seen, if any?
Now, that's a hard question to answer because we could literally go through every manufacturer independently And the answer would be different. There are some manufacturers that just stake their claim on doing it the way they've always been doing it, and they're never going to change. A lot of your stick and tin manufacturers do that. They're building it the same way they've always been building it, but they're trying to spice things up by giving you a little bit nicer, more contemporary interior. Contemporary is kind of in right now. Having contrasting tones on the inside, light with dark mix, is in right now. You're seeing a lot of folks put more attention into their kitchens and their appliances. But you go to another manufacturer, and another manufacturer is stepping their game up completely. They're saying, you know what, we want to be known for building the best RV, so we're switching to this, that, and the other. I know a couple manufacturers, I'm not going to give them away, that are actually switching to wiring harnesses as well. So that's going to be kind of a cool thing. You're seeing a lot of manufacturers now putting Asdel on the outside and the inside. They're trying to do things that give you a better overall experience. What I've seen from a dealership perspective, though, is that unfortunately, dealerships are still having to pick up the slack. That's what it comes down to. Just like Josh mentioned, the RV gets here. So just so folks know, there's traditionally 3 PDIs before you buy your RV. And then to call a factory PDI a PDI is not really being completely honest. A factory PDI means they'll pull a unit out of every so-and-so numbers of units. They'll send it to a PDI facility. They'll see what they're doing wrong on the assembly line, and then they'll send a check sheet back to their assembly line and say, this is what you have to do better. Maybe your staples are going in too far. Maybe your screws are too long. Maybe you're not gluing something properly, or you have a leak here and there. So they get that sheet. It is mainly so they can make line fixes. They basically send that back to their assembly line, and they can make these rolling production fixes to hopefully address problems for future units. Then you have another PDI, and there's these little baby PDIs that take place. The guy picks up the RV, the hotshot driver, the transport company picks up the RV. Sometimes they'll do a walk around. Sometimes they'll look inside of it. Sometimes they'll look at a few things before they hit the road. That may or may not happen. And then when they get where they're going, whatever route it took to get there, there could be another PDI where they just go on just to go through a check sheet, just like Josh said. They're going to walk through it just to see what the heck happened to this thing in transit. Are there any major problems? And then the final PDI happens oftentimes when you buy the RV. You go to the dealership, they're going to take it to the back, they're going to wash it off, they're going to vacuum it out, they're going to clean the counters, they're going to make it look pretty for you before it leaves. Sometimes dealerships will pull it in and try to fix every problem that they can find with it before it ever hits the dealership wall. I think Bish is one of those dealerships that does that. They focus on giving you something good to look at on the lot, so they're going to try to take care of problems that may have arisen during transport. Now, the challenge with what you asked is, what are people seeing in terms of quality improvements? Is it a dealership thing? Is it a manufacturer thing? Hopefully, everyone is trying to do a little better. And that's all it takes, trying to do a little better. Even the transport company. I can't tell you how many times, I mean, I'm just being 100% honest with you. I have seen RVs that have left a manufacturer and everything looks fantastic, but it has a 900-mile trip to get to a dealership. And that 900-mile trip is now turned into a 1,500-mile trip because the transporter decided to go see his grandma, aunt, uncle, and best friend in different states before he took it to the dealership. That's why a lot of people wonder, well, I got this order number from Alliance or from Brinkley or so-and-so saying my RV just came offline. Why is it taking 2 weeks to get to me? Oftentimes, that is the process of actually physically getting a transport company to pick it up and get it to you or to a dealership. And sometimes when that occurs, they take it over less than perfect roads. I'm not saying transport drivers are bad. They do a huge service for the industry, and they're the only reason you have an RV to look at when you go to a dealership. But the reality of it is, there are certain circumstances where it may have been jostled a little bit much. They may have had to make an aggressive maneuver to go around an accident, something in the road, things that have happened. And when it arrives at the dealership plays that last leg in trying to get that thing fixed up and trying to get that thing in the condition it should be in for you, the consumer, to buy it. And you should only buy from a dealership who's committed to doing that. That's the key. And that's one of the reasons so many of you guys like Josh and like working with Bish, is because that's something that he takes very personally. And I think that that's something every RV dealership should take personally, because that's ultimately who you're buying the RV from.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, JD. I mean, that was one of my big sales points when I was an outfitter out of Lincoln, Nebraska. That's what I did. I was like, this thing will be ready for you to go when you're here to pick it up. But Josh, what do you have to say to that? Do you see any improvements happening, if any, with quality and service?
So I do see some manufacturers investing more in the customer experience now. I don't know that people really realize how much the manufacturers have been doing even pre-pandemic in that. So, well, heck, we just experienced the passing of Mr. Pete Legal. The big guy over Forest River. Unfortunately, his time with us has passed. One of the things that people don't realize is that he was one of the first big, like, head honcho guys to invest in RV tech training. He basically, one of the guys that he knows was sitting in his office, and Pete was kind of leaning back and said, "Why don't you start a school for kids to learn how to fix RVs?" And Pete was one of the first major people to fund an effort like that. And a lot of people don't know that. Don Clark was also one of the major, and continues to be a major contributing partner to various RV tech schools. The president of the Towables group of, like, Winnebago Grand Design, effectively. So, there's a lot of money and effort being invested in that tech side of things, which is important. And that takes a while for that to spin up, The recently here, it was about a month ago now, I actually got a call from the VP of customer service at Forest River. And he said, "Hey, we're having this little panel. We'd like you to kind of come in." And that's all I really knew. And one of the interesting things is, when I showed up, I had no idea what was happening. Well, what they basically did is they had all of the heads of their various teams. So whether it was surveyor, primetime, coachman, didn't matter. All the heads of, like, the warranty and service staff members from their brands, they were in there. And then they had a panel of 4 dealers. I didn't realize I was going to be in front of the class.
Uh-oh. JD?
Yeah, they came out. Okay.
He was just getting to the good part.
At this little panel, there was myself, and I was kind of there to represent.
Josh, you cut out. You just disappeared for a second. Go back like 15 seconds.
Okay. Well, Forest River invited me to this little panel where multiple different dealer people were directly in front of basically the heads of all the Forest River service and warranty staff. And the thing was, they were saying, what can we do better? What do you see when it gets to your store? Because they're so focused in here that they can't see all of the rest of it. And I thought it was really interesting, because the thing was, I was there, somebody from Wana RV, a guy from General RV, 4 or 5 different dealers were all represented there. And if there's one thing dealers love to do to one another, it's call each other liars. And when 4 or 5 of us sit there side by side and we all go, "He's right, he's got a point," they really listened. Now, the trick is that takes a long time to get up and running. My message to them was, yes, there's these things that come in and we have trouble, and the computer side of the warranty process is slow. I agree, and that should be better. But if we got it done better the first time, if it came off the production line better, that reduces the total amount of service work down to something where it's manageable. Because right now, it's too big of a monster. And everyone kind of goes, I mean, it's hard to argue with that. It's an easy thing to say. It's a harder thing to accomplish. I appreciated the fact that they were willing to have the conversation, and actually have had me back a couple more times to kind of, like, share some insights and ideas on different things that we see at a dealership. But the other thing here is, like, Forest River has actually either purchased or repurposed existing facilities into, like, customer service fulfillment centers. So manufacturers are understanding that there is an absolute need, not just it'd be neat if, but an absolute need to improve the customer experience if this industry is going to continue to be successful. It takes a while to get that built back up, but they're aware of it, and I hope that those efforts continue, because it's a big expenditure up front. But I feel like that's like planting a seed in the ground. That's something that will come back and pay you tenfold if you do it right. You take care of the customer's going to take care of you. It's just that easy to me.
Yeah, and adding on to
That's
that,
absolutely
Josh.
spot on.
Okay, you got anything to add on that, JD?
No, I was just going to say he's spot on, and I think that that's ultimately the goal, is getting awareness to manufacturers that that's one thing that we do, and I think that we do really well. Is, you know, we went to we went to dinner the other day with the folks at Alliance, and they wanted to hear what our viewers thought of their units. They actually care. And I'm not saying Alliance is the only one. There's other manufacturers that you sit down with them, they want to hear what people say about their units. They truly do. The good, the bad, the ugly, whether they implement the fixes, whether they implement the changes, whether they do any of that stuff is outside of our control. All we can do is help notify them of what we're being told. But at the end of the day, if they just take care of their customers, if they just take care of their dealers, if they just step up and stop making it so difficult to get things resolved, I really feel as if those manufacturers who do that will excel above the rest. And the first one who does that with an affordably priced RV will excel above the rest. That's the challenge that I think we run into. And some of them do that. Believe it or not, as many people complain about something breaking in their RV, oftentimes they complain before they look for a resolution. And there are so many folks who, when they found a number to call and they called whatever manufacturer they bought their, or whatever manufacturer built their RV, the manufacturer's like, we'll send you the part. Yeah, we'll take care of you. I know that a lot of people associate that level of service with brands like Alliance and Brinkley and Riverstone and some of these higher end brands that you pay a lot of money for. But the reality is nobody wants to have a bad rap for having a unit that's giving people problem. Nobody wants that. That benefits nobody. So they all, I believe, want you all to be happy. But at the same time, though, I think the challenge oftentimes is we all have knee-jerk reactions. There's a certain YouTube channel that certainly has had a lot of knee-jerk reactions when at the end of the day, they're actually getting taken care of. And give manufacturers a chance, I think, is one piece of it. Know what you're buying. Know how much you're paying. I think that's another piece of it. Know what you're getting for that. But then at the end of the day, just do your research, do your homework, and understand what you need to be able to do to own an RV. Because you got to be a little handy in order to have a good time in an RV, really.
Correct. And
I'm
then
gonna, hold on. I'm going to scan this QR code because I want the free whatever you were talking about there.
There you go. We get the DIY at 30 things you can fix by yourself in that ebook. Save you time and money. With
you
your
are drastically overestimating my ability to fix anything other than dinner.
50%, maybe 50% of that. 15 of them, maybe you can do DIY.
Sorry, I have a squirrel moment.
Yeah, there it is again here. So we've covered a lot about warranty. We can touch more about warranty with you guys here real shortly. But customer service, there are companies that are trying. Alliance is one of them. You said they can ship stuff right to you. Maybe if you're a full timer, they'll ship it right to you. I've heard stories of Alliance shipping directly to your campsite, basically getting it to you some way, somehow. Don't know how, but they do. I've heard the same with Brinkley as well, doing very well. You can call Brinkley's customer service and you can talk to those guys. But you guys talk about it quite a bit in your channels. Have you seen meaningful change? Like you're saying, JD, that you're getting Alliance asked you about everyone saying, what are they saying on your comments, on your videos and stuff like that. But have you seen any of the companies actually taking action on these comments or what they're hearing back, all the feedback? Yeah, JD, if that's open to you, what are you seeing out there?
No, I have. And Alliance is a good example of that, going to the new touring suspension on their fifth wheels, going to the new pin boxes on their RVs as well. Anything that a manufacturer does to reduce shock and vibration in an RV, I think it helps tremendously. So that's one of the first things I always look for. You guys know when I do an RV review, I focus very heavily on the axle, suspension, and what they're doing. And I want to give you an example. So a lot of people believe every RV needs G-rated tires. I kind of certainly believe that. I'm one of those people that says, I don't care what it is. I want G-rated tires at minimum on it. But then the side effect of that is that you have a tire that's a much, much higher PSI, a lot more air. It's a much thicker, firmer sidewall. And you're consequently going to add vibration and roughness to the RV that already is pretty dang rough riding by itself. A good example of that is my F450 pickup truck has G-rated tires on it from the factory. If I hopped out of my F450 and hopped into an F350 dually, it's going to have 17-inch wheels on it, and they're not going to be G-rated. They're going to be more of a light truck tire. That difference alone makes about a 25% difference in terms of ride quality. The F350 rides significantly smoother than my 450, and the only difference really is the tires from a suspension perspective. So as we talk about that, and we're like, okay, so on an RV, which you're not riding in unless it's a motorhome, but in an RV, I want a higher grade tire on there, but I'm not going to do anything to my suspension. So what if you've just increased the shock and vibration inside of your RV by 25% because you went to a higher rated tire, but you did nothing to absorb the new shock and vibration that goes along with that higher rated tire? So I look for a higher rated tire. I look for improved, upgraded suspension components on the RV. I even say balance it. Guys, if you want an example of how important balancing your tires is, it's cheap, it's quick. And take your RV to Discount Tire. They now work on commercial tires, which is awesome. Get them balanced. Why? If you want personal experience of how important it is, go out to your car, remove all of the weights off of your wheels, and drive it down the road for a little while and see how fun of a ride that is. Your RV is 10 times worse than that. Consequently, your RV is also loaded with wood and nails. So the smoother you can make the interior of your RV when it's being towed, the longer it's going to last. And that's one of those reasons why I love it when I see manufacturers who are now putting upgraded suspension on travel trailers, upgraded suspension on fifth wheels, upgraded pin boxes. I love it when I see manufacturers taking steps to reduce the amount of shock that's being transferred up those sidewalls into the superstructure of an RV. And most manufacturers are starting to do that. A lot of them are starting to do that were never doing it in the past. And I love the fact that brands, again, like Alliance, I hate to keep calling them out, but brands like Alliance, brands like Riverstone, brands like Brinkley are focusing so heavily on reducing the amount of shock and chatter that rattles up through the suspension into the superstructure. And that's actually going to make your RV last much longer than one that doesn't focus on that.
Mini earthquakes all the time. If you can upgrade suspension and tires, you're going to do a lot for your RV, right?
Yes, sir.
So Josh, anything that you see like advancement in technology that he was talking about, like, or in just in customer service and warranty?
Yeah. My work doesn't overlap as much on that backside of things. Thankfully, we have a whole team that I'm blessed to work with that takes care of a lot of that. But I have absolutely seen an increase in more, especially travel trailers, starting to use various enhanced suspensions, like Cougar recently. Cougar, I think some of the Imagines started using like MoreRide or Road Armor upfit kits, and very rarely has that ever been done from a successful sales standpoint in the RV industry. I remember way back when J-Flight was the only stick and tin camper the world had ever seen that came factory standard with a MoreRide shackle system. And it absolutely, that was one of the best years for service records I ever saw from J-Flight. But it was a significantly more expensive component that made the RV potentially less saleable. And one of the things that I have encountered so many times, because I'm a person who, I'm not directly in sales. You don't got to squint hard. I'm very adjacent to it though. And I interact with a lot of people who walk in the front door of an RV dealership. I have seen so many people walk into a very high level, premium level RV, trailer, fifth wheel, doesn't matter, and say, this is just like that other one. And they refer to a significantly bargain basement kind of trailer. I see it at show season. We'll have people look at, they've been, down multiple rows of RVs at different dealerships, and they see these really high premium level trailers. And then they end up walking into a stick and tin camper that just has a similar floor plan, and they go, it's exactly the same. Not everybody can see it. They can only see that this one's $13,000 less. And it's the same for $13,000 less. And again, if we have that disconnect where we are not educating customers on what makes the difference, they buy the thing that costs less, because why would you pay more? You know, and in the average sales-based scenario, when you have a customer in front of you who's willing to say yes, people just tend to let them say yes. You know, I have absolutely seen, like you said, better suspensions, better pin boxes. That new Helix pin box is, I think, something that I hope catches on like crazy, because so it's the, like, if you look at the newest Cougars, my last couple Brinkley Model Z videos, there's this new hitch pin box that has a big orange spring on the front of it. Basically, that's called the Helix pin box, and it transfers up to 50% less violence that JD was talking about from the truck into the through the hitch. 50% less violence absorbed by the structure, 50% less stress on the frame. That's huge. Like, a couple times here, we keep saying a couple of these brands, like, the names Airstream, Rockwood, Alliance, some of these groups keep coming up. Look at the suspension. Look at the running gear they ride on. There is an extremely high correlation between the brands that we keep saying stay out of the shop more frequently and the brands that invest more in their suspension. If you want to keep the RV out of the shop, make it not rattle as much. And one of the best ways you can do that is an RV that has a better suspension. And that is not something people don't understand. And the hardest part is there's no easy way to get them to understand, because if you happen to actually be in an RV and like sit in a travel trailer and get towed around the block, and in multiple RVs that have different suspension systems, you will absolutely notice a difference. But that's unsafe and illegal, and I don't recommend doing that. But if you could, oh my Lord, it would be insanely telling.
Yeah. So these things going down the road, taking many earthquakes. Yeah. So suspension is a huge, huge thing to, it's a big opportunity to make a better, I guess, less warranty calls, less poor customer experiences. It's going to make a huge difference moving forward. But what are some other like big opportunities in improving the customer experience for RV industry that you're seeing? Or is there a piece of advice that you would say to the manufacturers or dealers that would help better the service of customers? JD, I'm going to open the floor up to you on this one.
I just think that the manufacturers should probably watch some of the videos that we put out, as well as other folks who travel, folks who do upgrades to their RVs. It was really cool to see some manufacturers start incorporating great solar into their RVs, and specifically Victron and brands that are really, really considered to be premium. It's great to see manufacturers switching to like Goodyear Endurance tires or putting heavier duty, better rated tires. It's great seeing upgraded suspension, use of Asdel on the outside and inside wall. It's great seeing this stuff. So I want manufacturers to continue to do this, but then I also want them to truly get a pulse on what people are saying. Maybe focus some on warranties. Focus on providing a little bit longer term warranty that covers things. Focus on clarity as well. I think a lot of folks would really like to know how much weight I can truly put into the basement storage of my RV, and not just assume that whatever cargo capacity my RV has can all be put anywhere I want to put it. The fact is that clarity, communication, and innovation are all things that people want in the RV industry. And a lot of that will lead to better quality. A lot of that will lead to a product that is more in tune with what people expect. And I'm going to be honest with you, on a video you're going to see me put out really soon, and it's related to this whole rat issue that I've been dealing with. None of them made it inside of the RV, but they sure as heck made it into areas of the basement and the subfloor that I don't want them to be. But a challenge I have for the RV industry is, why don't you put a sticker on the side that shows how well you're doing preventing pests from getting into your RV or rodents from getting into your RV? These are true challenges that people deal with every single day. And oftentimes, believe it or not, these are things that make you have a negative opinion of a manufacturer when it has nothing to do with the manufacturer. It has everything to do with how an RV is being stored, how often it's being used, and what people are doing proactively to not, again, like I said earlier, not turn their RV into an abandoned home, because we all know what happens to abandoned homes. And they get lived in. Let's just put it that way. If not by you, by nature. So it's really, really important, I think, that we take another look at it, and we keep informing manufacturers that they need to do better, that there's always room for improvement, that they should never rest with thinking that we're doing it completely right now. We're making the money we're trying to make. We're a profitable organization. We're a company. We're turning out a reasonably good product. There should always be room for evolution and improvement. And I think as long as manufacturers adopt that mentality, listen to consumers, and try to make every customer at the end of the day as happy as you can make that customer, that is ultimately the most that they can do. And that's all I would ask.
Well, R&D, like if it, I don't disagree with any of that. Again, the cynical side of me, I'm not optimistic that a lot of that will be adopted, not in anything close to the time frame that we would like. Something I think, though, that could immediately, directly help a customer understand the usage expectations of an RV is if RV warranties were delimited by time and mileage. I will die on this hill. Like when I did my video talking about frame flex, I talked about how RVs aren't necessarily intended to be pulled around every single weekend. And someone said, "What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. Why did I buy a travel trailer if not to travel?" I fully understand why you think that, because you were never properly informed on the expectation of that RV. The problem is RVs don't have things like odometers. Some people say, well, you're telling me if I use it too much, I burn out the warranty? That's stupid. No, that's automotive. And that is accepted across the entire industry. You might have a warranty that is something like 3 years, 36,000 miles, and we absolutely accept that. Now, if another vehicle has a 5-year, 60,000 mile warranty without any explanation, it is painfully obvious this is built with the idea of being used more, harder, and longer with fewer problems. If the RV industry, like if you looked at two RVs and they both had a 1-year warranty, even if the duration of the warranty didn't get bigger, because I wish it would, but it probably won't significantly, not for a while. The RV industry is re-implementing what the auto industry did years ago. Auto industry used to have pitifully short, like 90-day warranties, and now they're much, much longer. RV industry is slowly getting there as the price goes up, because you have to build better and differently to live up to that. But if you had two RVs that had a 1-year warranty, and one had a 1-year 400-mile warranty, and one had a 1-year 1,000-mile warranty, or whatever numbers you prefer, whatever numbers make you feel okay about this analogy, you would immediately look at this and understand that RV is built better than that RV, and it costs more than that cheaper RV with the lower warranty. That's one of the reasons I'm a massive proponent of ABS. First of all, it's a safety feature that's mandatory for professionally trained semi-drivers, that is not mandatory for somebody like me who took driver's training at 16 years old, and you can't tell me I can't drive a 40-foot death machine. But ABS is not required for somebody like me, but it is required for somebody to do any sort of CDL work or professional towing work. But ABS can track wheel revolutions, which can tell you mileage. And frankly, we don't even necessarily need ABS to do that. We could just have a simple odometer, hubometer on the thing, which is not terribly expensive, that could allow for this. Now, suddenly, everybody has a reasonably accepted expectation of how much, how often, how far this RV is supposed to be used before you should reasonably expect some kind of failure. And an enhanced warranty or an enhanced service, like preventative DIY maintenance system. But we don't have that. And if that one thing happens within my time and my career in this industry, I'll feel like, great, somebody else can pick up the torch and take the next step. But that's the one thing I want to continue to preach out there and hope for. And I hope customers continue to request and demand these things, because it is so attainable today, and we don't have it. So instead, what we have is third-party influencer partnerships that make you think you can use it. Problem-free philosophy, Hakuna Matata.
Yep. And you just made a really great point there. But we are seeing some manufacturers that are stepping up and putting odometers, putting ABS on the RVs. And those are, to JB, your point, those are what we're looking for. That's what we want all the manufacturers. If there is a regulation in the industry, that would be the regulation. Put an odometer on every RV, put ABS on every RV, but more so, also base the warranty off of that ABS, or sorry, off of the odometer. Just like Josh said, if I'm looking at two RVs that look identical on a dealership lot and they're both pre-owned, or maybe one's pre-owned and one's new and they look the same, and I'm like, ooh, I can save a bunch of money on this pre-owned one. And it had an odometer. I'm like, oh, it's got 30,000 miles on it in 1 year, whereas this brand new one has no miles on it. I could make the assumption, well, 30,000 miles on a car isn't much. 30,000 miles on an RV is a hell of a lot of miles on an RV. It's so much more than you probably would ever imagine, considering most RVs only have maybe a couple thousand on them in a year. So when you start seeing massive amount of miles appear on an RV, and then the person gets out of it to upgrade to another one, or for whatever reason they get out of it, it's at least an understanding of the usage that RV's had and how much of that usage has been physically towed down the road, because nails, screws, and staples can only hold on for so long. And you put work into your RV, you go out to your RV, and I make this point so many times, go out to your RV if you own it. Pretend you actually care about it. Go out, spend time in it a couple times a week. Look for problems. Get on the roof if you can. Hire someone to get on a roof. Get your neighbor's kid on the roof so you can look at the ceiling, look at things that have happened. There's so many times something tiny turns into something huge because you just neglected it and you didn't think about it until a disaster happened. People don't let that stuff happen to their homes most of the time. You hear something weird coming from the attic or the ceiling, you call somebody, and you don't let it turn into something over a 3, 4, 5 month period that destroys your home or costs tens of thousands of dollars to fix. You hear something spraying behind a wall. I hope most people aren't just going to be like, oh, well, it'll go away on its own. Most people would probably call a plumber and they try to get it fixed. You've got to do that if you own an RV. You have to treat it as if you spent a lot of money on it, because odds are you probably spent a lot of money on it.
Well, JD, real quick to your point, you talked about not making an RV an abandoned house. That is the thing. The average RV is unattended the vast majority of its life. So when that little thing happens, there's not a person there to catch it until it becomes a big deal a lot of the time. And that's a whole other thing. Someone over here said, Josh, you're letting people off the hook for not properly educating themselves on their RV before they bought it. Again, yes, it is. There is a customer has a responsibility, but again, I still think before we can reasonably point fingers of blame at customers, we have to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, have the agents of the industry, be it manufacturers or dealers alike, I'm not saying we're off the hook either, have we genuinely done the job that we could to educate them, or have we left them in the weeds? I don't necessarily blame a customer for being uneducated. Not everybody grew up with RVs. We're supposed to be the ones to help them bridge that gap. And that takes longer, and you don't make as much money if you take a slower path through the sales route. I do think that's what a customer deserves, but maybe I'm being a little bit like head in the clouds, kumbaya about it. But I don't spend my money any different than anybody else. And some of the stuff I've seen, I would not be okay if that was my money and the problem blew up. I get why that guy went ballistic on Facebook. I don't think Facebook is the place where you should try to start a warranty claim, which some people seem to think. But before I can ever blame a customer, it's the customer's fault on FrameFlex. I don't think that. I think that there is a drastic lack of clear, disseminated information and education put there for a customer, and there's way too much murky, borderline predatory efforts to just get their money and let them think whatever they want,
And I think that's from manufacturer down to dealer, and then dealer to the customer. I think there's a lot of telephone game, a lot of murky waters. It's not easy to find information. That's why we're trying to do stuff like this, guys. And we're about to get in the Q&A here section, but guys, it's been wonderful. JD and Josh, is there anything else that you would like to add in before we kind of go into that Q&A section? Then everybody listening, start dropping some comments in there, what your questions are. And if you'd like to hear more of this, please let us know in the comments as well. So JD, Josh, anything else that you'd like to add in there before we kind of move on?
No, JB and I, we could talk until so for anyone listening, we had intended to try to keep this down to an hour. We've obviously failed. Let's just get into the Q&A.
JD? Yeah, okay. We're getting hungry over here. So, all right. Well, I'm going to let Jordan, you want to drop some stuff in here? Does the lack of knowledge at certain dealerships play into that in general? I would say yes. Speaking from my side of things, I came into the industry as a newbie completely. I'm from the residential construction world. I went into RV sales because I was like, oh, I like camping and stuff like that. And the first 6 months, it was the worst. It was like anxiety for me because there was so much out there. We had 14 to 20 different brands just on our lot. And that was a lot for me to even pass on, from each manufacturer to the customer. So yes, in my opinion on that. Josh?
Totally agree.
I say fire some questions away here, guys. We're watching the live chat all together on screen right now. So one of the fellows over here said, hey, maybe you should do some videos on helping educate buyers. Here's a really sad thing. I do, and I have. And they are very often not watched.
Yep.
So I guess maybe I have a question for the comment section. I'm going to answer the question with a question. How do we get people interested in educating themselves on an RV? I think the thing is an RV is a recreational vehicle. We just want it to be fun. We don't want to have to take care of it. How can we as the industry get people to want to learn about and take care of these things? That's maybe a question that I have. JD, if you want to field one of these things, take it away, bud.
No, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, the fact is, like, I read comments all the time where people are like, just the industry is BS. The industry is horrible. The industry build. There's no excuse for a horribly built RV. There's no excuse for a lot of this other stuff. The reality is there's so many resources. We've made so many videos talking about this. We've made so many videos on things that you should look for. The brands are out there. If you're looking for the top of the line, best of the best brands, they're out there. If you can afford them, great. A lot of people can, a lot of people can't. When we visit factories and we see the cheaper RVs, the stuff that a lot of people would never say they would own until they see that that's what they can afford and they end up owning one. Just do your research. Everything in an RV that you see as a problem typically isn't that hard of a fix. Believe it or not, it's a really simple thing. When you start letting an RV and the problems you're having with it ruin your life and make you feel as if you made the worst decision ever, that's where you should have maybe reevaluated if you even should have gotten into RVing. Because I've made this point time and time again, and I know Josh has as well, that owning an RV and using an RV is work. It's never going to be the simple walk on the beach. You could own a $3 or $4 million Prevost motorhome Class A diesel pusher. You still got to hook up your black tank. You still got to drain all that crap out of it. You still got to look for rodents. You still got to change the oil. You still got to do these things no matter what. It doesn't matter how much you spend. Getting into RVing is going to have problems. You're going to have challenges. You might have to hook a towed vehicle behind your vehicle. You still have to get your hands dirty no matter how much you spend. But just set your mind correctly to, if I'm buying something super inexpensive, super cheap, it might be pretty good to know how to operate a power drill, duct tape, and electrical tape. It's going to save you so many more times than you think.
Well, I want to do a twofer here. There's a fellow who's asked a question at least 6 times, and I've just never had an opportunity to jump into it. He actually took to hitting me up on Facebook Messenger on the side over here. So, fellow named Ryan said, why are you required to have a separate insurance policy for an RV when you pull it behind your vehicle when your vehicle's policy covers the RV? That varies state to state, bud. Each state has different insurance guidelines on vehicles and RVs and stuff like that. And it also varies if you have a loan on it, because the bank will require you to have full insurance on the RV, whether it's being towed or not, because your vehicle's insurance policy only covers it while it's hooked up and being towed, not while it's unhooked and like at your house or something like that. So there's different scenarios that play into that. Somebody else asked, why are owner's manuals so bad? I agree. They're completely worthless. I've literally opened an owner's manual and it says water heater, light the water heater. And then it moves on. That's it. There's zero information as to how. And I think a lot of it is because there are certain times where RV manufacturers, if they change suppliers or if they run into a shortage and they have to use a substitution part, they essentially have one generic overarching owner's manual that is intended to effectively service everything. But the problem is when you have an entire company like all of Jayco, all of Grand Design, all of Keystone, all of Forest River, you get that's enough examples. There's no one there. They use all the parts from every supplier, so they don't tend to make an individual owner's manual for each individual RV. They should. I'm not saying that's right, but that's why, because they make it as generic as possible, so they don't have to go back to the print shop. Now, here's another question back to the audience. RV manufacturers have been trying for years, probably for cost savings reasons, but they've been trying for years to make owner's manuals exclusively digital, that you would download a free app. You can have the owner's manuals for your specific RV by VIN number on your phone. But people have been so resistant to that. So how do we get the community interested in making the owner's manuals not suck? I don't know. All right, so I answered two. JD, you're up.
No, that's a great one. One that somebody asked, and this is one that, boy, if I want to say the email question I get more and more and more, it's the one, what's the best brand of fifth wheel to buy, or what's the best brand of travel trailer? That is an impossible.
What should I get?
Yes, that is the impossible question that everyone wants the answer to. You would have to literally fill out an entire document with information for me to even come close to approaching that. And then I didn't know what your credit score is. And if you plan on financing it, I mean, there are so many things that go into understanding the best. What's the best at what? What's the best at meeting your budget? What's the best at being towable by a 3/4 ton truck? What's the best, what's the best from a wiring perspective, a plumbing? I mean, that's a hard question to answer. I'd love to give you an answer to that question, but there is no answer, because if I tell you the best of the best of the best is $400,000, you're probably gonna be like, okay, what's the best in the $50,000 price range? So I can't answer that question. I'd love to, but I can't. I'm just looking through here, a couple of them. Okay, so I know that a lot of people bring up all sorts of things. This one's going to be a tough one, because the people will probably know who I'm talking about. There's a YouTube channel out there. The guy's an inspector, and he posts a lot of content about inspecting RVs and things that he runs into and stuff like that. I have absolutely nothing wrong with that content in terms of going into an RV with the expectation that things should be really well done. They should always use what the experts say are the best of the best of the best components. And I would love to see that, because it would fix some issues. But here's the thing a lot of people may not know about. A lot of issues people and experts and folks who claim to be the best at identifying problems, things that they tell you oftentimes aren't really issues. Yes, plumbing can be a major part that really, really bugs people. But the vast majority of RVs that are sold don't experience failures in many of those areas. And because they don't experience failures, trying to upgrade those components will add a significant amount of cost, just to give you peace of mind that a part that probably will never fail will never fail. And again, I'm not saying that switching to better components is ever a bad thing, but there's never just one better component that you can switch to, because I can put in better fittings, I can put in better this or that, but then it leads down the path of, now I need to put in better a higher quality air conditioning unit. I need to put in a better water heater. I need to put in a better refrigerator. And all of a sudden the price can spiral out of control. And it's a hard one to cope with, because at the end of the day, just like we've said time and time again, these things have to meet a price point that you can buy. And if they don't meet that price point, what's the point of making an RV that you go onto a dealership lot and say, wow, this thing is fantastic for the person who can pay for it?
So a fellow named D Baker 21168 says, why are only certain pin boxes approved by manufacturers? Basically for knee bone to leg bone relationship. For the same reason that there's a proper way for you to lift heavy weight with your own body. You lift from the legs, not with your back. And someone might say, well, I prefer to lift with my back. Yes, but when you do that, you're putting more strain in your body where it's not supposed to be, in a way it's not supposed to be there. And you end up breaking something. You're hurting yourself. Slipping a disc. An RV is kind of the same. The RV's spine is the frame, is the chassis. And it's expected to have, like, if this is a fifth wheel gooseneck, it's expecting stress to be applied this way. And it's reinforced to handle the stress being put that way. If you change a pin box or extend a pin box to tweak things further, you're putting more stress on the RV's lower back in a way that it wasn't intended to. And eventually it's going to slip a disc, and that's called frame flex. So certain things are made with certain components expected to be there. The problem is there's other things that could fit in that same slot, but they don't react the same way. And again, this goes back to properly educating a customer. Generally, many dealerships have known, it's been a commonly known fact in the industry for a while that, like, a common fifth wheel is not supposed to necessarily just have any old gooseneck adapter applied to it. But for the most part, if a customer is willing to pay for it, businesses have been willing to apply that hitch, knowing the customer could have negative side effects and typically failing to advise them of that. So there's the what and the why. Now, somebody else also said, what new tech, as in technology in RVs, isn't worth its weight in straw? Interesting that we went to straw and not sticks or bricks with the three little pigs. Who was that? Martin Watts. Personally, I have zero need, want, nor interest for voice activated tech in an RV. I love Rockwood. I love Rockwood so much. I really do. I'm a fanboy of them. But I went through not too long ago. They had a 20-foot GeoPro. Now, they were testing this system. It wasn't a guarantee, but they were testing a voice activated system on an RV so small that from the dinette or the bed or practically the frickin' toilet, I could literally reach over and activate the control panel.
Can you make a video on that?
Why do I need, yeah, I'll do that. Why do I need to sit and be like, hey, camper, open the awning, when I could literally I could reach right here. And if you're on the toilet and you can't reach the button, you don't need to open the awning on the toilet. So there's some of those things, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And for me, voice activation is one of them. I am also going to tell you that I am biased on this subject because I record a lot of Jayco product. The Jayco luxury fifth wheels have a voice activated system. And as I walk through a Jayco RV, I tend to say the word Jayco, which triggers the voice activated system. And then the lights go off on me or the slides start closing as I'm inside of it. And I don't need that in my life. Okay. So I don't need voice activated tech in RVs. That's just me.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you on it. Over technifying, if that's a real word, RVs, I think is one of those things that nobody really needs.
That's JD Nerdism number 37.
Yep, that's my new one. And real quick, to kind of jump back on pin boxes, another important thing is you got to also realize that these manufacturers, and let's be clear, we're talking about Lippert. And Lippert, yes, absolutely says these are pin boxes we want on our frames, or we approve on our frames, and some we don't. Part of it, and I had an opportunity to actually see the testing of this stuff. They go through the J2638 testing, which is 900,000 cycles in each, or 300,000 cycles in each direction. And 900,000 total cycles under load, and they see what it does to the frame. That's what it comes down to. They actually see what it does. And when they actually come away from this test going, I like what it does, or I don't like what it does, you can then ask the next question, why don't you like what it does? And 9 out of 10 times, they're going to tell you because it adds too much stress, it adds too much fatigue, it adds too much energy to areas that the frame just isn't designed to handle in those spots. So I would rather be cautious of that, knowing that, yes, there may be a brand. I'm a big fan of Gen Y. I love Gen Y products. But at the same time, though, if Lippert tells me don't put it on my RV, I'm not going to put it on my RV. At this point, I don't care if Gen Y says put it on your RV. I'm not going to until Lippert says, hey, we've worked with them. We've come up with a way for this to work well together. You're good. Or you take a brand that's independently tested it, like like the folks over at Brinkley, they offer it on theirs, or Lux, they offer it on theirs. There's brands that offer it, and they said, we've done the testing independent of it, and we will warranty it. We will take care of you if you have any issues with it at all. So I listen to what the manufacturers tell me, because regardless of if people think these engineers are a joke, they're real engineers, and they take their jobs very seriously. Because when you're a company like Lippert, you do have to be prepared for lawsuits. You have to be prepared that something could eventually fail. And what you don't want to do is have the lawyers come to you saying it's because you allowed something on your product that shouldn't have been on your product and it contributed to that. For me, I would rather go by what they tell me, do what I am supposed to do, and then trust that their engineers knew what they were doing. That's the kind of motto I live by, because I'm not a frame engineer. I'm not a structural engineer working at Lippert, seeing how they do their testing. They got 51 of them, I think. I forgot exactly how many of them were in there. And they do all sorts of static dynamic testing. They take it very seriously, because they're, a $5 billion company. And what they don't want to do is have everyone come back to them saying, well, you said anything will work on the RV, so I put anything on it, and now you have a problem, and now they're liable for that. So again, just to what Josh said, there's all these engineering reasons why you shouldn't put something on an RV that they tell you not to. It's not just because someone just doesn't like the brand, but at the end of the day, if you choose to and you have problems, it's very hard to go back and say, oh, well, they built a crappy product. If you made that choice, then that's one thing that they can now tell you, well, you did what we told you not to do.
Yeah, and I had one comment that I wanted to comment on. Someone said digital boards versus analog boards. I'm a huge fan of analog because you can change a switch a lot easier than you can change a board. But I also like the fact that some of these RVs are doing digital boards with like analog backups and like maybe they pass through storage or other places.
Systems, like the awning and
Correct.
the slide switch. Yeah.
Correct. And I like that idea. And I just wanted to comment on that. So I don't really know why they do that. I mean, obviously you can connect, Bluetooth, and you can control your RV from the steakhouse or wherever it may be and watch your temperature gauges or whatever it may be. But I really like that. But guys, thank you so much for being here. Everyone in the comment section, everyone that's viewing. We've been at this for 2 hours now. I think we need to wrap it up, but thank you so much. Join the RV Voice subscribe list all there. Check out Josh, the RV nerd. I'm sure you've heard of him, and JD from Big Truck Big RV. They are the experts, and that's why I brought them together on this. I wanted to answer the questions that you guys have, and we're going to keep doing this. Hopefully, if you want us to keep doing this, say yes in the comments, because we would love to do this for you guys. We want to educate you further so you know how to buy your first RV, or buy the what do you say, Josh? Buy the second RV the first time?
Yeah. What questions does the audience here want to get into? Because maybe that's just the topic that we'll tackle next. Because today happened because you asked the questions. Keep the questions coming. We'll do our best to answer them, guys. We don't have all the answers, but we'll try. I'm tired. I'm so tired.
I'm hungry. Josh, JD, are you hungry?
I ate in preparation for this because neither Josh or I know how to shut up, and we can make this thing go on for like 4 hours.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody listening, thank you so much for being here. Josh, JD, thank you so much for your support and love as well. And everybody listening,